Who is it?
But she is an alumnus of Berkeley. Caitlin Mills, she's handing out sticky notes. So you can see her there. She's going to involve you in an activities. She's the Academic Integrity Coordinator. Yes, that's a job now at universities. Academic Integrity Coordinator. You probably all understand why that is needed. That job's needed. Last week, an ad crossed one of my feeds aimed at PhD students. And the ad, it was a video, showed supposedly a PhD student at his computer. He turned the computer around to show the new AI tool that he was advertising, and he was writing his thesis for him while he was eating potato chips. Okay. So this AI tool now aiming to help you do your PhD for you. Academic integrity is thus very important. Okay. You all know it's very easy to cheat your way through things. Okay. So, he's going to tell us important things about what that means. And your role as upstanding moral citizens of the world, your role. Caitlin, thank you for coming.
Yeah, you bet.
I turn it over to you.
All right. Yeah, so my name is Caitlin Mills, as I was introduced, and I'm the Academic Integrity Coordinator at Red Deer Polytechnic. So the goal of this presentation today is to just give you some insight on what is the definition of academic integrity. We're going to talk briefly about academic misconduct, and I'll explain why those two topics are somewhat related to each other. I know as a university student you're navigating a lot, and it can feel overwhelming sometimes. And so just having these understandings and basic just introductions to these words can sometimes be a really good reminder to have in the back of your mind as you're proceeding through your degree. So to start, I'm going to explain who I am and what I do at RDP. So my role is a couple different things. I have my hands in kind of a few different areas at RDP. So the first and foremost is academic integrity education. So what does that look like? I talk with students, staff, and faculty about academic integrity. So that can look like maybe workshops, presentations. I do things that are like event-based stuff, so I'll sit at a booth and I'll have like games or interactive things like that that students can come up to and they can interact with to learn more about academic integrity. As far as staff and faculty go, I go into their classrooms with them to kind of collaborate on stuff like this, so communicating about academic integrity and bringing more awareness to the subject matter of it. And I collaborate with staff and faculty on what does that look like in your classroom and how can you bring that to life in your classroom. Instructor support and guidance, I go a little bit deeper. So on top of academic integrity, I also work very heavily in academic misconduct at Red Deer Polytechnic. So in that, we've seen a really big need to talk about what academic integrity is because academic misconduct has been more reported since we've updated our procedures at Red Deer Polytechnic. And so in that, we've seen a bigger need to talk about academic integrity. So instructor support and guidance, I focus really heavily on policy support for them. So I guide them through the reporting process. I talk to them about things to, like what is considered academic misconduct. and all those sorts of things. And then they come through me when a report needs to be filed. So they inquire with me about students' prior records, and then they proceed with a report. They send that to me, I file it, I keep it on record, and I deal with all the management of that. Now, I don't just deal with misconduct on the staff and faculty side, I also deal with the misconduct on the student support side. So in that, my role is remedial work. So a student has been reported for academic misconduct. They come see me, and I sit down with them and I talk to them, give them an opportunity to really reflect on the incident. So what happened? Why do you think that happened? What could you have done differently? If something like this comes up again, what do you think you could do differently next time? And now that you've learned from this scenario, what does academic integrity now mean to you? So those are kind of some things I do in a nutshell. So now that we've talked about that and are thinking about that, that's where your sticky notes are going to come in. I know some of you are so excited to learn what those are for. So what does academic integrity mean to you? So this is for you. I want you to just really, I'm going to give you a minute or two, and just write down, you can write down one word, you can write down a couple words, it is what it is, but pick one sticky note and just write down what you think academic integrity means to you. So I'm going to pause for a minute and give you a second to do that. And the second sticky note is for the end, so just use your first one. Alright, so now that you've had a second to think about what academic integrity means to you, I'm going to pause. This part's optional. If you want to shout out an answer, you're welcome to. But if not, I'm just going to list some common words that people come up with. But feel free to raise your hand and we can kind of go through maybe what some of you guys think, what academic integrity means. Otherwise, I'll just pause for a second and then I'll cover kind of some of the most common things that come up when we think of academic integrity. Okay, so when we think of academic integrity, we often think of things like honesty and being truthful, those kinds of things, synonyms along those things. And honestly, sometimes that might even go deeper for you as a student, depending on what your journey looks like in post-secondary and what it's looked like up to the point of post-secondary too. So thinking about that, now we're going to dive just a little bit deeper into that topic of academic integrity. So why does this matter to you right now? So I'm sure up to this point, you have built skills in academic integrity since we've all gone through school up to this point, right? So think of these kind of three things when you're thinking about why does this matter to me right now? So the goal is to build integral skills. So when you think about integral skills, you're thinking about skills that are related to the topic of integrity, right? So how do you like use skills that are related to building honesty, being trustworthy, showing that in your work? What are some kind of skills that would work towards that building that foundation? Once you've built that foundation, you can put that into practice, right? And that doesn't look like just in the classroom. You can be an integral person outside of the classroom too. So putting that into practice and using opportunities, finding ways to demonstrate that honesty, kind of do those types of things as you move forward in your journey here and outside as well. And then apply what you've learned. So this one is really big in school. So you're gonna, as you're navigating through your first, second, third, fourth year, whatever that looks like, first semester, even to second semester, you're gonna grow in those skills. As you practice them, it's going to be really much easier for you to put them into action and apply them into your work, into your life, into if you have a job right now, all those kinds of things. Integrity is just gonna come a lot easier because you've worked on building foundational skills that are related to it, you've put it into practice, and you've applied what you've learned on the outside now, in the classroom, in your life, all of those kinds of things. So, let's think about what academic integrity is really then. So the core principles, doing your own work honestly. There's a lot that comes into doing your own work honestly, but it really is just an overarching statement of what matters and what really is one of the big pieces of integrity is about when you do your work, you do it with the knowledge that you have and with the knowledge that you don't have, right? Thinking about assignments where you're going to have questions, this is an opportunity for you to learn and to grow, and if there's something you don't know, that's okay, that's what you're here for, and it's about doing that and practicing that honestly. Giving credit where credit's due. So again, this is something that we think about a lot when we hear the word academic integrity, so especially when it comes to writing, that might be something that really pops up for a lot of students is, how do I give credit where credit is due? So that might look like citations, that might look like a nice laid out bibliography. So you're gonna learn those things as you grow in your journey here. And I'll tell you, when I was a student, I definitely learned some things about citations and giving credit where credit was due all the way through my entire journey until I got to the end. So follow the rules of academic engagement. So oftentimes that'll be outlined by class, that might be outlined by professor. It can look different in different classes, different situations, but there are rules of academic engagement in the classroom, and then there's also ones that are set by the institution as well. So those are really important to be aware of, right? Because you're going to have rules around academic engagement that are going to be expected of you. And that's a big part of integrity. And I'll get into that a little bit later about academic misconduct, at least how it's defined at RDP, with the idea being that sometimes when we break the rules of academic engagement in the classroom, that can be counted as academic misconduct, right? So just keeping those things in mind and making sure that we are aware of those rules. And it can look as basic as, right, sitting here, paying attention, being engaged with the material, right? So all those things count, and it's important to you as a student to have that as your responsibility. And then all of these just really create that fair and equitable learning. So when we think about intellectual authenticity, that comes to really what you're doing in your work. So being genuine in your learning, representing your own ideas, efforts, and sources. And if they're not your own ideas or efforts, that's where you bring in those sources. And then you strive for authenticity, not for perfection in your work. So I have a little like check later on where you'll see that sometimes we as students put that pressure on ourselves to be perfect or to meet the best standard that we can, right? And sometimes we just have to learn to make those mistakes because that's part of just holding that integrity that you have as a student. Any questions so far? Any comments, thoughts about integrity? in action. So these practices build the foundation for everything you'll do in your academic and your professional career. So exactly what I've said right from the start, starting that integrity journey or building on what you already know of your integrity is going to follow you right into your career. So honest work, again, so we talk about that. So if we think about these things in terms of school and we think about these things in terms of work and profession, honest work is really, really important, right? Making sure that the university has an expectation that your work is honest and truthful, and that it's your own work, and that you're giving credit where credit is due. That translates right into a professional career too. So anything that you do, they're going to expect that you do that work honestly, and then that's going to build trust with those who you're working with, and as well as if you're working in a clientele field, right, people that come to you for that support in that field, all those kinds of things. It's really important that the work is honest. Respect for others. So again, this is kind of something that I've already touched base on. But keeping respect for our classmates in class is a super important part of integrity. Oftentimes when there is disruptions in the classroom or there are things that go beyond that, right, we're impacting each other's learning. And that kind of violates that piece of respect for one another. And so when we think about that, and we think about bringing that into a professional career, that is really the essence of what respect for others looks like in integrity. So holding that here and building that for your classmates when they're here and they're learning and they're listening, and you're here to do the same, it'll translate right over to the workplace. Responsible scholarship. So again, things like doing your work honestly and having that as a piece is really, really important. And responsible scholarship also deals a lot with that piece of like giving credit where credit is due, and making sure that you're aware of what plagiarism looks like, aware of what citations look like, all of those kinds of things. And then of course accountable choices. So there's a list of things that could go under this piece as accountable choices. But as a student, you are responsible to make those accountable choices both in the classroom and out of the classroom as well. And all of those kind of just put integrity into action, and that's not it, really. I'm sure that as you hear me talk, you're going to think about things that are going to come up for you that you'll see in your own academic journey or things that you've already seen up to this point. And it'll all build into that academic integrity in action. Okay, so quick check, first scenario. It's 11 p.m., your essay is due at midnight. While finalizing it, you find a paragraph online that perfectly expresses the idea you want. What do? So I'm going to read the options and just hold up a 1, 2, or a 3 depending on what you think it is. So option A, copy it word for word and submit it. It's just a minor assignment. Option B, paraphrase it, add your own analysis, and an in-text and in the bibliography citation. Copy it word for word, including only the link to the source in the bibliography. So when you're ready, hold up what number you think it is with your fingers. Yeah, good Kurt.
No, but
That's right. So it's option B.
it's the right one.
Okay. So, copying it word for word and submitting it, it's just a minor assignment. While that might feel like the direction some of us want to go, it's 11 p.m., the assignment's due, I've had to do a lot of other things. It's still really important to uphold that integrity in this piece, right? Even though sometimes we know that that might not be the most appropriate approach to the assignment, it's the easy one, right? And I get it, that's sometimes where we want to go, and especially if it's a minor assignment. But it's really important that we keep that honest piece of giving credit where credit is due. So why B over C? So C might seem like a tempting option because you still have a bibliography and you're putting the link in, but there are rules that we follow when we have citations. So it's really important that when you think about citing something, that you're following the rules, whether that's APA or MLA, whatever the requirement is for your classroom, that you put that into your writing. And so why might we paraphrase it versus copy it word for word? So a lot of times when we paraphrase, we are choosing to paraphrase because it's an idea that we're looking to put into our writing versus an entire paragraph. So a lot of times to take up space, we might feel like we want to put that entire paragraph in, but really to demonstrate that honest work, that you're demonstrating that integrity, those kinds of things. Paraphrasing that would be the best choice because it's going to demonstrate what you're learning so far. It's going to demonstrate your understanding of the material that you're putting into your assignment. And then, of course, we want the in-text citation. So anytime, as I'm sure most of you know, you put an idea into your text that was copied from somewhere, you do an in-text citation regardless of quotations, and then in the bibliography. So yeah, and that might change here and there depending on like if you're following MLA versus APA, those kinds of things. Your instructor might have different expectations too, so if you're ever like curious about what that looks like to class, make sure you ask. Okay, so let's talk about what is academic misconduct. So thinking about academic misconduct, the definition of it really is any action that attempts to gain an unfair academic advantage for yourself or somebody else, and it undermines fair learning and the value of your degree. So why do we really need to talk about this when we're thinking about academic integrity? So the two really do go hand in hand. So like I said, a lot of times I see students who have participated in some academic misconduct, and I'll ask them, what is your definition of academic integrity? And they can't tell me. I'll ask them, what is your definition of academic misconduct? And they can't tell me. And it's not because they're not aware of what they've done violated the expectation of the institution, of the classroom, of the instructor. But it's really this idea that we need to talk about that more in-depth understanding of what these words really mean. And when we understand both, yes, the academic integrity side, but also the non-academic misconduct side, then we are looking at recognizing and avoiding behaviors that could count as misconduct. So a lot of times I'll see students who are like, I didn't even know that that was misconduct. And so then that gives me the chance to say to them, yeah, well, let's talk through that. Why does that not seem like misconduct to you? And how can I explain that to you so that you understand that that is misconduct? The other thing is that it helps you understand the expectations of post-secondary education as a whole, as well as your specific institution. So a lot of times, academic misconduct does vary between institution, the reporting processes, how it's handled, all of those kinds of things are different from university to polytechnic to college. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that academic misconduct is prevalent and happens, and it's usually because we lack understanding about what it means and how it impacts us and things like that. And lack of understanding of sometimes what is and what is not considered academic misconduct. So again, just to reiterate that, why talk about it? It helps you recognize and avoid those behaviors that could count as academic misconduct. And it helps you understand the expectations of your post-secondary institution as well as post-secondary education as a whole. So it's not to scare you, I promise, even though it might seem like it. It is really to just have that conversation about it so that you're aware. So most common forms of academic misconduct. So I'm giving you a little bit of an insight to Red Deer Polytechnic because these are the top 3 that we saw this past academic year. So just as a blanket, we saw 352 cases of academic misconduct over this past year. In that, over 50% were plagiarism. Why? Because a lot of students didn't understand that Gen AI was a form of plagiarism if you're not going to cite the AI platform that you used. A lot of students didn't understand the definition of self-plagiarism. So this could be an example of submitting work that you've done for one class to another class without talking that through with your instructor, or taking an idea or directly quoting yourself from one paper to another without citing yourself as well. So self-plagiarism, Gen AI plagiarism, and then just plagiarism in general. So that could also look like misrepresenting things in your bibliography, all of those kinds of things. So that's why it's really important to just learn and understand the expectations that are in your specific classrooms, instructor to instructor, so that you can avoid that plagiarism. Then we just had some straight up cheating. We use cheating as a blanket term, but essentially just using that unauthorized material or help on exams, such as copying from classmates or looking up answers on closed book tests. Cheating could also look like having somebody go and do an exam for you. That was not supposed to be that person. Yes, that happens, and it has happened at RDP. So that was the number 2. So those are the top 2, and then we talk about improper collaboration. So a lot of times this one, we don't think about. When we think about an individual assignment, sometimes we consult with the people that are in the class with us, right? Person A might have a different kind of understanding than person B, and person B might like that. So they want to include that in their assignment, or they want to talk with person A about that. What is really important that your work is still your own. So if you're representing similar ideas to another classmate on an individual assignment, then that's what is considered improper collaboration. So just that idea of working together when individual work is required, including sharing completed work or collaborating without permission. We also had a bucket of other academic misconduct that happens, so things like academic misrepresentation, so forging results is an example of that. And then we had another category, so this was what I was mentioning earlier about some disruption in the classroom. Now this is like major disruption in the classroom or being disrespectful towards peers in the classroom. So at RDP specifically, we deal with that as academic and non-academic misconduct. So because the disrespect and disruption took place in the classroom in an academic setting, it is labeled as academic misconduct, but because it's not specifically related to your coursework, degree, those kinds of things, it's also labeled as non-academic misconduct. So those were some of the buckets that we had. Yeah, and so just some things to think about as you move forward, and I'm sure that I've been a part of a few different conversations where plagiarism almost always comes out on top, right? And in most cases, things are going to happen by accident. And that's just where you have that conversation with your instructor, right? A lot of times it's not about the punishment piece, rather than, hey, I noticed that this was incorrect, and here's how you fix it. And honestly, that's a lot of times how instructors might handle it, even at RDP. But it's really the deep and more noticeable ones where the citations are misrepresented in their work or completely hallucinated. They don't exist. And that's usually Gen AI is doing. So just a little insight on that, because generative AI takes information from the internet as a whole, it'll make up citations for you. So that's just something to keep in mind. But those are usually, when we see reports for plagiarism, it's those kinds of things. So same as last slide, we want to know these things and understand these things, because it's going to help you recognize what to avoid, and it's going to help you recognize when to ask for help, and when you have questions, which is also absolutely okay. So quick check number 2, we're going to do the same thing if you think it's student A. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah. Do you know what Grammarly is?
Grammarly? Yeah.
Does that count as generative AI?
So at RDP we do count it as Gen AI. Now, if you want to use Gen AI, here's my suggestion: talk to your professor, because a lot of times some professors are going to be okay with you using Gen AI to a certain degree. If you can't access your professor, look in your course outline. Does it say anything in there about Gen AI, all those kinds of things? But yes, Grammarly is considered generative AI. And a lot of times it's because it'll make sentence completion suggestions, or at least that's what we've seen from some students at RDP. So if you're looking to use Grammarly, just talk to your instructor and see if that's an acceptable tool to use in your course. Does that help? Any other questions about academic misconduct?
Can you speak more on the self-plagiarism?
What specifically would you like to know what it is? Like,
When is self-plagiarism self-plagiarism?
so self-plagiarism is really self-plagiarism when you are taking material that you've created already and you're either resubmitting it to an assignment and not giving you the credit to your own name. I know it's weird and it's awkward because it's like I came up with the idea, this should just be fine. But a lot of times universities want to see those original ideas, even if it's similar across classes. So an approach that's been taken at RDP is a lot of times students will ask and say, listen, I've written a paper that would be applicable to this topic, right? And can I submit it for this course? And some professors find that acceptable. Some professors would like you to rewrite the paper. So self-plagiarism is really that lack of citing yourself for the work that you've created, if you're going to reuse it for another assignment. Does that help a little bit? I know it's weird and it feels kind of awkward because you did come up with the idea and you came up with the writing and it's your own words. But it's that idea that the work isn't unique to each place it's being submitted to, if that makes sense. Any other questions? Yeah?
How do they even find out about that?
That's a good question. So a lot of times, at least at RDP, so what we have is we have an online thing that will read the text that's submitted, and it does actually create a database of what's been submitted. Not necessarily, a database is very formal, but it can read submissions that have been put into the university and submitted, and then it will tell you whether or not that's happened before. And so then professors can see at RDP, oh, a student has submitted this. They don't usually see who it belongs to or things like that, so usually a lot of times it'll get called in for plagiarism first. And then they'll say, no, this is my paper, and they'll show them the paper, and then that's when the conversation of self-plagiarism happens. So it's usually like a database, for lack of a better term, if that makes sense. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm sure some of you had a chance to read this now. So if you think it's student A, lift up finger 1. If you think it's student B, lift up finger 2. So 2 students are working on an assignment. Read their actions and decide who is engaging in academic misconduct. So collects data, but notices a small mistake in their calculations and changes the numbers to match expected outcomes. Or student B completes their assigned tasks and ensures all data reflects their own work regardless of expected outcomes. 1 or 2. 1 or 2 is participating in academic misconduct. All right. So that one was a little tricky. So let's talk through why this is student A. So you'll see this a lot more in courses or in programs where data collection is required, as well as producing calculations or things like that. So this could be, you know, anywhere in like engineering, things like that, to math degrees, to those kinds of things. So this is where you might see that. So collecting data, but noticing a small mistake in calculations and changing the numbers to match expected outcomes. So in this case, changing those numbers to match the expected outcomes is the misconduct, because the original calculations were actually the work that was done and the numbers that were received from that work. So student B completed the assignment, ensured the data reflected their own work and their own calculations, and that's regardless of expected outcomes. So of course the goal is expected outcomes. However, in some cases, when calculations are done or data is completed, it might veer a little bit from the expected outcomes. And if that is changed just to match the expected outcomes, that's called forging or falsifying data. All right, do we have any questions about that? Okay. So student rights and responsibilities in academic integrity. So this is kind of the two important pieces.
Should we give them a break?
Yeah, you bet. Yep.
Okay, break time, 5 minutes. Very upset. He was very angry. And his friend got at me because his friend had plagiarized the paper that he plagiarized. So he's upset at his friend for plagiarizing a paper.
Oh my gosh.
Took a little while to explain to you that he had actually plagiarized and plagiarized paper. So, I found that sometimes students get quite confused as to what constitutes academic misconduct. And you'll have more than once at this institution I've had students say, well, I didn't understand I was plagiarizing. So again, very important to pay attention to what you've been told today. It can save your academic career, because if you go to our academic calendar, look up academic integrity, and look at what happens. There's a procedure there. Look what happens if you academic misconduct. You can get dismissed from the institution. Okay? So it's very, very important. We take it seriously. So back to you, Kate.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, so honestly, that kind of ties into what we're about to talk about next. So we're almost there. So talking about student rights and students' responsibilities. So as a student, you have a right to many different things. There is a student rights responsibility on the Berman webpage. So if you're curious about what your rights are as a student and how Berman University has decided to outline what that looks like, go to the same policies page that your prof was just talking about and find your student rights responsibility, your student rights policy at the bottom. I didn't see something that covered student responsibilities, but I'll show you what we talk about at RDP. I'll show you the document really quick. So student rights, they provide a supportive framework that enables and encourages honest and ethical behavior. Understanding your rights helps you navigate academic expectations responsibly, which is a key part of participating in integrity. So as a student, you have a right to timely feedback. As a student, you have a right to knowing what is going to be taught to you in this course. You have the right to be able to get into contact with your professor. You have all of those rights as a student. And the goal there in giving you those rights is to ensure that you are having that supportive framework as you navigate here. You have the right to a supportive classroom setting. You have a right to a supportive learning environment. All of those kinds of things. So again, if you go to the policies page on the Berman webpage, you'll see student rights. Student responsibilities tie right into student rights. So those are actions and habits that are executed by you as the student that uphold academic integrity. So fulfilling your responsibilities and helping you meet those academic expectations honestly and ethically. So I'm just going to show you quick what ours looks like, just so you have an idea of what this sort of document would look like. So student rights and responsibilities. So you'll see that we cover like the general idea. Here we cover the student rights, so learn in an environment that respects diversity, inclusion, and equity, exercise freedom, have privacy protections, academic freedom, review their graded work, have intellectual property protections, so that would be any work that you produce here as a student, and then student responsibilities, so things like how do they expect that you conduct yourself here. Communicate respectfully with others, behave in ways that are consistent with the environment, communicating with instructors, those kinds of things. So we have that policy, and then it also outlines definitions as well as an appendix 4 types of academic misconduct and types of non-academic misconduct. So if you have more questions about what that looks like, you can find this on RDP webpage too if you're interested in the types of both academic and non-academic misconduct. So, yeah, so thinking about the student rights and responsibilities, then they both go hand in hand in really building that, what we talked about, building, practicing, and putting into action that piece of academic integrity that you are required to do as a student. Okay, let's do a quick check. So rights or responsibilities. If you think it's a right, put up finger number 1. If you think it's a responsibility, put up 2 fingers. So use proper citation in all assignments. Is that a right or is that a responsibility? Yeah, excellent. That's your responsibility. So it's your job to make sure that you are citing things properly. If you have questions about what that looks like, you go to your professors. Or you can go to your course outline and it might outline some things in there depending on the class too. Receive clear instructions on assignments. Is that your right or responsibility? That's your right as a student. So if you are receiving an assignment, the instructions should be clear and you should be aware of what you're supposed to do. If you need further clarity, it is your right as a student to go and get that further clarity from your instructor. Expect confidentiality in academic matters. Is that your right or your responsibility? That's your right, exactly. So you have the right as a student to expect confidentiality in all academic matters. That could be submitting an assignment. That's your right to expect confidentiality around that assignment. That might be between you and your professor, whatever that looks like, right? Okay, attend class regularly and participate actively. Is that your right or your responsibility? Yeah, exactly. That's your responsibility. So as a student, it's your role to make sure that while you're in class and you're here, that you are paying attention, that you are leaving room for others to pay attention as well, and participating in a capacity that meets you and where you are as a learner. Access support services when struggling academically. Is that your right or your responsibility? Yes, that is your right. So as a student, you have a right to support services that can support you when you're struggling academically or when you're struggling with things on the outside as well. So that's why you guys have the Student Success Center here with academic and non-academic supports that are available to you. And then finally, ask questions when unsure about expectations. Is it your right or your responsibility? Yeah, so it's your responsibility, though you do have a right to ask questions too. But it is your responsibility to ask those questions when you are unsure about expectations. And that just ensures that you are really completing that work to the fullest of your abilities. All right, so this is just a reflection page. So these are some things to think about, right? So think about your current approach to assignments and consider these questions. How do you typically handle tight deadlines? How confident do you feel about citing sources correctly? And all questions that are related to that. If you find yourself saying, you know what, I'm not 100% on something like this, or I'm not super confident in that, then that is you building that awareness of your patterns so that you know when to seek help. If you don't know where to seek help for the things that you're looking for, ask your instructor, talk to somebody that is in the Success Center, go to those resources that are on campus, and they'll help you navigate what is accessible to you to support you with those self-assessment questions. Okay, sticky note activity. I know we did this already, but we're going to do it again. So now that we have gone through this presentation, rewrite either what you wrote earlier or write your new definition or word that stood out to you of what you think academic integrity is. So while you do that, I'm just going to talk through this last slide. So academic integrity is your advantage. So as a student, use academic integrity to your advantage. Why? because academic integrity helps you become a strong learner. How cool is it when you go and you have a conversation with somebody and you guys both know something that you're talking about, right? So becoming that honest learner and learning, it builds that self-confidence. So you're in conversations with people and talking about something maybe on the more academic side, and you know about it, and that person knows about it, and that's because you've taken that honest approach to learning about the topic, and you've become that strong learner, and you've built that self-confidence. That's going to look different between each and every single one of you, but it counts in every single situation. Preparing for your career, so that is exactly what professionals are looking for. Integrity. Are you an integral person? Are you honest? Are you trustworthy? What are you going to bring within that to this position, right? Trust and credibility, we just talked about that, and that applies here at university as well as in your career. And then long-term ethical habits. So starting that now or building on what you already have now does lead to those long-term ethical habits that you have. And then of course so much more. So you can take some time as a student to reflect on what that means to you. Okay, so that's all I have.
I trust you all learned something today? Yeah. Okay? Have a good evening. Yeah.